This is BBC World News. I'm Geetha Gurumuthy. Our top stories. Hollywood star Alec Baldwin says his heart is broken after he fired a prop gun on a New Mexico movie set, accidentally killing the cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. More than 180 people are killed in flash floods in southern India. Dozens more are missing. 1,000 people are dying from COVID every day in Russia. We visit a hospital overrun with patients in the northwest of the country. The West Bank village fought over by Palestinians and Jewish settlers. We visit the two communities of Beta locked in violent dispute. And Queen Elizabeth is back at Windsor Castle after spending a night in a London hospital. Hello, welcome to BBC World News. The Hollywood actor Alec Baldwin says he is heartbroken over the death of his cinematographer, who he accidentally shot dead with a prop gun on the set of his latest film. Halyna Hutchins was flown to hospital by helicopter but died of her injuries. On Twitter, Mr Baldwin said, "There are no words to convey my shock and sadness regarding the tragic accident that took the life of Halyna Hutchins, a wife, mother and deeply admired colleague of ours." He went on to say, "I'm fully cooperating with the police investigation to address how this tragedy occurred. I'm in touch with her husband, offering my support to him and his family. My heart is broken for her husband, their son and all who knew and loved Halyna." Well, the film's director was also injured by the same discharge of the weapon. Lisa Mazimba has this report.
Halyna Hutchins was an up-and-coming director of photography, named a rising star by American Cinematographer magazine in 2019. She was considered to be an exceptionally talented individual. The investigation into what happened on the set of Rust, a 19th century western, is continuing. Police say that Alec Baldwin, the star of the movie, discharged a prop gun during filming. The director, Joel Souza, was seriously hurt. Halyna Hutchins was flown to hospital by helicopter but died from her injuries. Filmmaker Adam Egypt Mortimer, who worked with Halyna Hutchins on his 2020 action film Arch Enemy, described her as a huge talent.
I met her before I'd seen any of her work. I met her at a film festival, and within just a few moments of talking to her, I felt like she had such a strong vibe, such a sense of commitment to art and like sort of the integrity of wanting to make cinema that I wanted to work with her.
According to the film's production company, it was an accident that happened when a prop gun carrying blanks misfired. But this early in the investigation, the police say they hadn't reached any conclusions and are currently describing it as a shooting investigation.
There's so many safety measures and procedures that are supposed to be taken on every single set where there is a firearm. So we're still trying to learn what could have happened. Was there a misstep along the way? Did someone forget to do something to try to cut corners? We just don't know. We're still learning.
It's sadly not the first time that someone has died from a shooting during filming. In 1993, the star of The Crow, Brandon Lee, was fatally shot by a gun which everyone thought was only loaded with blank rounds. Actor Rhys Muldoon says he's recently been working on a movie with a large degree of gunfire.
The producers actually held a very clearly important meeting and decided to do away with blanks altogether and use SF, basic special effects and CGI, because you can get all of those. You really truly can in this day and age get those things of a gun firing without losing anything.
Alec Baldwin, who's also a producer on the film, has spoken to detectives about what happened. Meanwhile, the film world is mourning the loss of Halyna Hutchins and waiting to see what lessons may have to be learned from her tragic death. Lisa Mazimba, BBC News.
Let's cross live now to Los Angeles and speak to our North America correspondent Peter Bowes. Peter, there's been some more information in the last few minutes, hasn't there? Just tell us about what Alec Baldwin has said on Twitter.
Well, yes, Alec Baldwin tweeting within the last hour and really, I think, expressing the sentiments that many others are feeling today, especially here in Hollywood. He says there are no words to convey his shock and sadness regarding this tragic accident, the accident that took the life of Helena Hutchins, a wife, mother and deeply admired colleague of ours. And those are sentiments that have already been reflected by those who knew Helena and knew of her huge enthusiasm for the job. She was often described as a rising star in this entertainment business. Alec Baldwin goes on, he says he's in touch with her husband, is offering his support to him and his family. He said, "My heart is broken for her husband, their son and all who knew and loved Helena." We have also some new developments reporting by Variety magazine, the entertainment industry newspaper here in Hollywood, quoting a union member, a local union member. This is from the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees. This is a group that represents technicians and other workers that you will find on a film set. Quoting an email from one of the local members saying that a live single round was accidentally fired on set by the principal actor, Alec Baldwin. This was an accidental weapons discharge. And this report also goes on to say that the union is pointing out that none of its members were actually on the set at the time, saying that local New Mexico crew members staffed the props, set decorations, special effects and construction departments on Rust, the film, not its members. Now, we've heard no reaction from the police and investigators in response to this report yet, but if true, it certainly sheds some new light on the situation.
And we've been hearing in the last few hours from people in the industry about the safety measures that are supposed to always be followed. There are different types of prop guns. Obviously, we don't know what's happened here exactly, but you know, clearly something terrible has happened.
Yes, something awful clearly has happened, and you're right, the debate, and this is a debate that's involving a lot of people who are not particularly well informed about this situation, but it is reasonable to examine the situation. That's exactly what's happening here in Hollywood, just people really befuddled by how it could happen, perhaps understanding better than you and I how prop guns actually operate on a set. And I've heard one description where a prop gun is actually, you could describe it as a rubber gun, something that really isn't capable of doing anything. It's the kind of gun that might be held by an actor during rehearsals. And then a more realistic gun, it could in fact be a modified real gun that isn't actually firing bullets, but it's firing blanks, would actually be used during the filming. Now, we don't know the precise nature of this particular device, but you could be clear that this is what the forensic experts will be looking at. They'll be examining that device to see exactly what happened. Was it prepared in the wrong way? It's quite possible this was a film set, that the situation was being filmed, that cameras might have been rolling at the time, and that kind of footage will be part of the investigation.
Peter Bowes in LA, thank you very much. More than 180 people are now known to have died after heavy rainfall triggered flash floods in Nepal and two Indian states, Uttarakhand and Kerala. It's a heavy blow to families already dealing with the fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic. In Kerala, landslides have wiped out crops, some linking the intensity of the monsoon rains to climate change. Our South Asia correspondent Rajini Vaidyanathan reports from Idukki, one of the worst affected districts in Kerala.
Kerala, India's coastal paradise, is testament to the beauty of nature. But it's also been a reminder of the devastation it can leave in its path. The state's had more than double the usual rainfall it gets in October. Thousands have been left homeless after floods and landslides. Dozens have died, many of them children. A smart and friendly 3-year-old, Sachi, was buried under the mud. His mother, Sophia, is in hospital. Covered in bruises, she was trapped by the landslide and said the mud came right up to her head. My son woke up in the morning and went to brush his teeth, she told me. He didn't even have his breakfast. Then we heard a noise like thunder and the house fell down. In a nearby bed, Sophia's 2 other children, who were also injured. and are facing the pain of life without their sibling. Rescue teams are still searching the river for victims.
In this one small village alone, more than 100 homes were completely destroyed and just as many were left damaged. And we're just standing in what's left of one family home. As the river rose earlier in the week, people say they ran for their lives.
Images of this house in the village went viral. Just like that, it was gone. Revati lived here with her parents and escaped minutes before the family home was washed away.
We never expect that like this happen in a few moments. We lost everything.
So have these families staying at a makeshift camp. Scientists in India say rising sea temperatures are to blame for extreme weather here, and it's often the poorest who are hit the hardest. Rajini Vaidyanathan, BBC News, Kerala.
More than 1,000 people are dying from COVID every day in Russia, a figure that makes it the worst affected in Europe. The scale of new infections and deaths has alarmed authorities so much that all workplaces are being shut down for a week from the start of November. Many Russians are sceptical of the vaccine that the country produced, leaving them unprotected. Richard Galpin has visited one hospital in Russia's northwest and sent this report.
The reality of the COVID epidemic laid bare. Wards in this hospital filled with patients on oxygen to try to keep them alive. The vast majority admitted to hospital with COVID because they'd not been vaccinated.
There are 800 beds in this hospital and 750 of them are taken. And the vast majority of people who've come here have not been vaccinated.
Only a quarter of the population in Vologda has had the vaccine, a major concern for doctors here.
I am very worried about this. The more unvaccinated people there are, the more patients we have. All the capacity we have in our hospital is dependent on the people being vaccinated.
Despite all this, the vaccination centre I visited here was quiet. Just a few people coming through for the jab, which would save lives. In the cemeteries of Vologda, the grave diggers have been in high demand, the number of burials doubling from 50 a week to 100. For families burying loved ones, there is no escape from the coronavirus restrictions. Those carrying the coffins must do so wearing full protective equipment. Richard Galpin, BBC News in Vologda.
The Parliament of Moldova has approved a state of emergency to secure gas supplies after Russia didn't provide it with a new contract. The month-long measure will allow the government to buy gas from elsewhere for the first time since the collapse of the Soviet Union. It's seeking European Union help. The Russian state-controlled concern, Gazprom, slashed supply by a third last month when a long-running contract expired. Our Moscow correspondent Steve Rosenberg has more.
I'm standing outside a fuel station in Moldova and look, there are dozens and dozens of cars here. It goes all around the block, the queue. People have been waiting sometimes 3 hours to get methane and propane. And look over here, there's another queue, a queue of taxi drivers who've also been waiting several hours to get fuel. There is a gas shortage right now in Moldova. Why? Well, this country relies heavily on Russian gas. But at the end of last month, the gas contract with Russia's Gazprom expired. New terms haven't been agreed. And in the meantime, Gazprom has reduced supplies to Moldova by about a third. It's upped the price of gas to a level that Moldova says is unacceptable. Many here believe that Russia is using energy to put political pressure on Moldova. I mean, for many years, this country was in Moscow's orbit. But in the last year, Moldova has elected a pro-EU president and parliament and is looking for closer ties with Europe. Today, the parliament in Moldova announced a state of emergency that will free up money to help the government buy gas from other sources, from Europe. But that won't be cheap either. As for Russia, it continues to insist that it never uses energy as a political weapon.
Steve Rosenberg there. Do stay with us here on BBC World News. Much more ahead. President Biden angers China by saying the US would come to the defence of Taiwan in the event of an attack from the mainland.
Every day, the Philippines does more than wait. Putting together new adventures and experiences for you to try. We're making our sites better for you to see. Cooking up new dishes for you to taste. We can't wait to welcome you.
Whether it's the big screen or the small screen, Talking Movies is your backstage pass to the world of film.
We'll preview and review the latest releases,
as well as what's streaming on your small screen at home.
We talk to industry leaders and movie greats around the world.
And meet the stars and the filmmakers to let you know what's hot at the latest film festivals, virtual or otherwise.
Join me, Tom Brooke, and the rest of the Talking Movies team on BBC World News.
This is BBC World News. Our main story this hour, the Hollywood actor Alec Baldwin says he's heartbroken after he shot and killed a cinematographer with a prop gun on a film set in New Mexico. President Biden has said the US would come to Taiwan's defence if it was attacked by China. The comments are a departure from a long-standing US policy of being vague about its commitments to the island. A White House spokesman has told US media outlets that his remarks did not signify a change in policy. I asked our Asia-Pacific editor, Michael Bristow, what he made of President Biden's remarks.
Well, it's not entirely clear exactly if this is a change of policy or not, but if we take President Biden's words at face value, it would appear to suggest a big change in US policy towards Taiwan. At the moment, it has a policy of what's called strategic ambiguity, essentially being vague about how much support it would give Taiwan in the event of an attack from China. And that, many analysts believe, has kept kind of a delicate peace in that area for several decades, essentially because what it does is it doesn't give anyone on Taiwan the encouragement to declare independence because it would know America would come to its support. And also it discourages any kind of action on Beijing's part because Beijing doesn't know how America would respond if it attacked Taiwan. So the policy has worked quite well up until now, but President Biden appeared to suggest a change. But as you mentioned there as well, the White House has rolled back slightly and said there isn't a change in policy. So we're not entirely sure yet whether there's been a change or not.
Any response from Taiwan or China?
Well, of course, Taiwan at the moment has a governing party which favours independence, wants more of a role on the world stage, wants other countries to recognise it. So it's really welcomed these comments from President Biden because it appears to give support to its attitude, its position, the way it's running Taiwan. Of course, the reverse is true in Beijing. Beijing considers Taiwan part of its own territory, and it certainly doesn't allow, or certainly doesn't want anyone else interfering in what it considers is its internal affairs, and that's exactly what it said today. It also went on to say that America shouldn't give independence forces in Taiwan any more encouragement, shouldn't give them any wrong signals. So that's been the response from Taipei and Beijing.
Michael Bristow there. The number of Palestinians killed in confrontations with Israelis in the occupied West Bank this year is already more than 70, the highest figure in 5 years. The worst hotspot for violence has been in the Palestinian village of Beita. 8 people have been killed there, many hundreds injured. Locals began organising protests after hardline Jewish settlers set up a new outpost on land claimed by Palestinian olive farmers. Our Middle East correspondent, Yulan Nell, reports.
Confrontations in the olive groves. This year, these hillsides have seen the most deadly violence in the West Bank. Armed Israeli soldiers facing Palestinian protesters using slingshots. week after week.
These young Palestinians are hurling stones at Israeli soldiers who are up ahead of us, and the Israeli soldiers have been firing back sponge-tipped bullets like this one. I just picked it up. The real target of the Palestinian anger is those caravans up there on the hilltop.
This Jewish settler outpost, Evyatar, was set up in May. All settlements are seen as illegal under international law. But this one didn't even have official Israeli approval. 3 months ago, the settlers agreed to leave on the condition that they could come back if a government survey found Israeli state land here. Now it has. And a founder of the outpost tells me he hopes to return within weeks.
God willing, it will be a large city. Evyatar will be a large city with many, many Jews, with agriculture, with kindergartens, schools, a large community of Jews.
But Palestinians from Beta say this land belongs to them. In recent days, they've been allowed back to pick their olives, with Israeli soldiers watching on. One landowner tells me about his cousin who was shot dead in the demonstrations. He feels abandoned by the international community.
We are confused. If we protest peacefully against the occupation, we're killed and our protest is ignored. If we carry guns, they say we're terrorists. But if we sit quietly, our land gets stolen.
With renewed fears that this hill and its trees could be lost, there's growing desperation among the Palestinian villagers. They say they won't give up their struggle. But the settlers aren't giving up either. Yolanda Nell, BBC News, Beta.
EU leaders have threatened further action against Belarus over migration. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen accused Belarus of state-sponsored people smuggling through its policy of recruiting migrants in the Middle East and pushing them into the EU.
We will keep up the pressure on the Lukashenko regime. We have already proposed targeted measures to reverse visa facilitation for the regime and its proxies. And we are ready to explore options for further sanctions, not only for individuals, but also for entities or companies. Second, we agreed that we need concerted action. Belarus, as we're observing now, is looking at opening new routes. It has offered further visa waivers to additional third countries. And we will continue our engagement with these countries to limit this state-sponsored smuggling.
Now, royal officials say Queen Elizabeth is in good spirits and back at Windsor Castle after spending Wednesday night in hospital. She was taken in for tests after being forced to cancel a trip to Northern Ireland. Her doctors had told her to rest following a busy round of public engagements. Here's our royal correspondent, Nicholas Witchell.
Windsor, 2 days ago, early afternoon. A convoy of royal vehicles was seen heading in the direction of London. Was this the convoy taking the Queen to hospital? At around the same time, at Windsor Castle itself, a very small royal standard was seen to be flying, its presence supporting the palace's claim that the Queen was resting at the castle. In fact, the Queen was here, at the private King Edward VII Hospital in central London. The palace clearly hoped her visit would go unnoticed. It did until last night, when The Sun led with the story that she'd spent the night in hospital. That prompted a short statement from the palace. Following medical advice to rest for a few days, the Queen attended hospital on Wednesday afternoon for some preliminary investigations, returning to Windsor Castle at lunchtime today and remains in good spirits. Buckingham Palace insists that, like any citizen, the Queen is entitled to privacy over medical issues. The palace will therefore say nothing about the nature of the investigations ordered by her doctors. The one thing we can say is that she seemed completely well on Tuesday night when she hosted a reception for global business leaders and others at Windsor Castle. According to people who saw her, she was relaxed and on good form. That was just the latest in a busy few weeks for her, which had included a visit to Cardiff for the opening of the Welsh Parliament on the 14th of October, her attendance 2 days earlier at a service at Westminster Abbey to mark the centenary of the Royal British Legion. Quite apart from the daily and largely unseen work of the monarch with audiences, and boxes of paperwork.
Oh, of course, it's good. It's good morning, isn't it, to you?
According to the palace, the Queen resumed that paperwork last night, a few hours after returning from hospital. She is, the palace says, continuing with light duties and remains determined to attend the COP26 summit in Glasgow at the end of the month. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
Just before we go, let me remind you of our top story this hour. The shooting incident on a film set involving the actor Alec Baldwin that left the cinematographer Helena Hutchins dead. Alec Baldwin has tweeted, "There are no words to convey my shock and sadness regarding the tragic accident that took the life of Helena Hutchins, a wife, mother and deeply admired colleague of ours. I'm fully cooperating with the police investigation to address how this tragedy occurred, and I'm in touch with her husband, offering my support to him and his family. My heart is broken for her husband, their son, and all who knew and loved Helena." Well, there is more, of course, on all our news online at the website, and I'm on Twitter at Geetha Gurmuthi. I'm back with the headlines, and then in 30 minutes or so with a full roundup.